Hello everyone, today we are going beyond storytelling. We are using historical books or tradition and school research to understand traditional governance in Rwanda from the pre-1300s period all the way to 1961. Before we begin, it is important to understand that Rwanda's history is not simple or linear. Historians like Jean Vansina and Rwandan scholar Alexis Kagame have shown that Rwanda's political system was complex, evolving, and sometimes debated among historians due to the nature of oral traditions and colonial interpretation. Let's look on the historical sources and debates. This reconstruction of Rwanda traditional governance is mainly based on traditional collected and analyzed by Jean Vansina and raw historiography preserved by Alexis Kagame in Colonial records. However, historians debate these sources because oral traditionally may change over time. Colonial administrators sometimes distorted information and political narratives influenced the historical interpretation. Therefore, we must analyze Rwanda's history critically, not just descriptively. Before the emergence of centralized kingdoms, the region that became Rwanda was inhabited by diverse communities of hunters, farmers, pastoralists. This group lived in decentralized societies, organized mainly through clans and kinship rather than a central state. Authority was local, not national. This means that Rwanda's later kingdom did not appear suddenly. It evolved from existing social systems. Let's look on the origin of the Kingdom of Rwanda. According to antecedent to modern Rwanda, the Nyiginya kingdom, Rwanda did not begin as a strong centralized state immediately. Jean Vansina explained that the Nyiginya kingdom gradually developed and expanded, especially around the 17th century, from a small political nucleus. Rwanda consisted of small chiefdoms. The monarchy emerged because people needed security and unity. Welfare required stronger leadership, and also expansion required centralized coordination. That's why Rwanda consisted of small chiefdom. Yes, monarchy was not accidentally. It was a political solution to instability. However, it also introduced centralized authority, reduced the local independence. Let's look on the social structures in Rwanda Kingdom. Pre-colonial Rwanda had social categories often described as Hutu, Tutsi, and Twa. But importantly, these were not rigid ethnic groups in early periods. Or social identity was often flexible and based on economic activity, cattle ownership, social mobility. People could move between statuses through wealth, especially cattle, marriage, service to the king or patrons. For instance, a poor cattle keeper could become part of an elite household over time. Let's look on the economy and daily life in Rwanda Kingdom. Rwanda economy was mainly based on agriculture, where they cultivated bananas, sorghum, and beans. Also, it was based on cattle herding, and it was based on local trade between regions. Cattle were not just economic assets; they were a symbol of prestige, political tools, social status markers. Control over cattle meant control over people and loyalty. Now we are going to look about the growth of political institutions, which began from 1600s up to 1800s. Rwanda governance became more structured over time. Institutions include ubuhake, which means cattle clientship system, and uburetwa, which means labor obligation system, and ubwiru, which means loyal rituals and scarred authority. These institutions organized the society, strengthened the loyal authority, controlled the resources. If we say resources, we included land and cattle, but also created hierarchy and increased inequality. Ubuhake especially created dependence relationship between the rich and the poor. Let's look on centralization of power, which began from 1700s up to 1800s. By the 18th century, Rwanda had become a highly centralized kingdom. That centralized kingdom was structured from king up to populations. The king, and also in Kinyarwanda they call him Mwami, was supreme authority. Below the king there was what we call chiefs, who have duties for administrating the kingdom, the administrators. Under chief there was population, who were the subjects. According to Alexis Kagame, the king was a political leader, spiritual symbol of unity. Centralization created unity and stability, but also reduced the local autonomy, increased the risk of abuse of power. Governance depended heavily on the quality of leadership. And also, just now let's look on the reforms introduced by the King Rwabugiri, who reigned from 1853 up to 1895. King Rwabugiri transformed Rwanda into stronger, centralized and militarized states. He expanded territory through wars. He strengthened administrations. He reinforced the ubuhake and the uburetwa. His reforms created the strong state structure and deepened inequality, increased peasant exploitation. This period marks the peak of traditional state power and its social tensions. Let's look on the colonial transformation. The colonial transformation began from 1897 up to 1959, where it started by German rule from 1897. German introduced indirect rule in Rwanda and maintained the monarchy but controlled it. Belgian rule began from 1960, where the Belgians transformed the government through strengthening administrative control, restructuring local leadership, where they introduced what we call chieferier system, and transformed what we call institutionalizing ethnic identity. But also this colonial rule turned the flexible identity into rigid categories, increased the social inequalities, reshaped the governance for administrative control. Later identity card reinforced these divisions, which resulted the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda. Let's look on the rising tensions in the mid-20th century. By the mid-20th century, inequality had increased. Colonial restructuring intensified divisions. Political awareness was rising. This created a high and stable political environment. Also, you know that some Rwandans were referred from our country to the neighboring country, which made the creation of which created some parties like RPA, which intervened in stopping 1994 genocide. This created high and stable political environments. Let's look on the fall of the system from 1959 up to 1961. Uh, the monarchy was officially abolished, and lots of violence and political change erupted. These caused by the long-term inequality, colonial manipulation, and political awakening. These lead to the some impacts. The traditional governance in one left deeply rigorous, either positive and negative. In positive, we found that it read the strong political organizations, unified state structure, administrative efficiency, and in negative, there is social inequality system, and it centralized the power imbalance, colonial distortion of identities, and many modern political and social dynamics in Rwanda can still be traced back to these historical structures. Using historical research and scholar works, we can conclude that Rwanda's traditional governance system was highly organized and institutionalized, political sophisticated, and adaptive, but also socially unequal in structure, vulnerable to external manipulation during colonial rule. This is why understanding Rwanda's history requires both appreciation and critical analysis. If you are enjoyed this, click subscribe, and make a share to your friends. And remember, this history is not just about the past. It helps us to understand the present, in which help us to prepare the future. Be blessed. May God bless you.